Okay, so I haven't done a tutorial in a while, and I thought I would do something that seems to come up a lot. It's just like a basic foot rig. Things can get overcomplicated really quickly, and I just wanted to show a very simple foot rig that works really well, and just sort of give you some of the concepts and ideas about why we do what we do and how it works. So I'm just using the human male from the bipeds. One thing I wanted to point out, though, is that his feet do angle outwards. I tend to like having feet not do that because then when you zero him out, he has sort of like a duck stance. But it is more anatomically correct to have the feet doing that. I'll still rig straight and then afterwards move the rig into position, and I'll show you how that works. When I'm using a scripted rig, I do put the joints into what will be the final position, and then the rig gets built straight and then put into position. So it's similar, but I'm just going to do it by hand. So what I'm going to do is go to the side view here, go into X-ray mode, and I'm going to go under skeleton, create joints. Defaults are fine. Now, I normally build my joint straight, but in this particular example, I'm going to do it just real basic. So hip's going to be somewhere around here, knee is going to be somewhere around here, and ankle is going to be somewhere around here. Now for this last joint, I'm actually going to hold shift and go straight down. And the reason I do that is because I want this joint rotation to be as close to world space as possible, very flat. If I was to have the joint angling back this way, I'd have sort of a weird rotation. Generally speaking, when we animate, we keep that foot sort of in this flat position. I'm then going to add one from where the toe bend's going to be, and then straight forward. That's probably fine. So since I built in the side view, these joints are going to be aligned to the center, which is okay. And because these are just joints are just a hierarchy, I can just take this joint and then shift select the ankle joint and hit P for parent. I'm just parented together, and that's totally fine. Joints can be parented and unparented, moved around, and whatever. And actually this joint here, I can just delete. I don't need it. It was just there to help orient this joint. When you're building joints, it's the child joint that tells the parent joint how to aim and where to put the axes. And speaking of axes, what I want to do is go in here and orient these joints. So the first thing I'm going to do is select all of them. Select HI. And I use select HI a lot, select hierarchy. So I actually put it into the marking menu of the hotbox. And there's a couple of ways you could show that local rotation axis, and I just wanted to show in 2024 they added a new thing into the orient joints options, and that is to toggle local axes visibility. And so now I can see where they are. I'm going to hide the mesh real quick, and the one thing I want to point out is because of the way I built this joint chain, Maya is trying to determine which way the up axis, or in this case the y axis, wants to be. And it just guesses based on rotation. So if I do like something from, say, a side view, and I do a create joint tool, and I build something like an S-curve, and then I show all the, whoops, and I show all the rotate axes, you see what happens when it hits here? On this particular part of rotation, it's aiming the Y out that way. On this particular, it's going this way, and that particular, it's going that way. And it's not a giant deal. But it is nice to have all your rotations matching each other, especially when I'm doing something like, like say it's a snake tail or something like that, or a snake. I want all those Y's to aim the same way. So I'm going to cheat real quick with my tool, but then I'll go back and show you how to do this by hand. And I'm just going to go in and grab these joints and flip them, and this one, and flip it, and the very last one, orient it to match. And see how I have all my Y's oriented the same way? Now if I select all of them and rotate in Y, I get a more predictable rotation. You don't have to do this, it's just helpful. All right, so if I go back here and look at my leg joint, I did build it with a slight angle, which is going to make Maya create what's called the preferred angle. So when we get to IK, that's what tells the IK which way to bend the joint. Should go this way or this way. But I want to switch that y-axis. So to do this in vanilla Maya, I'm just going to hit F8, and under here, up on the status bar, you have this thing with this little question mark. And if I right-click there, you see I have this thing called local rotation axes. And now what I can do is actually select those axes and rotate them. Now it's a little bit weird because when I first select it, if I have, let me just pop out of selection. Okay, cool. when I first drag select, I get nothing selected. Even though it's highlighted my joint, I have nothing selected. You can see in my channel box, there's nothing selected. If I show the attribute editor, there's nothing selected. So it's only on that second selection that I'm actually going to get that little yellow local rotation axis. And when I rotate this, I want to be careful. Actually, did I already get screwed up somehow? Hey Joe, look at that. That's interesting. That shouldn't happen. I'm just going to undo a whole mess here, because I'm wondering why that got screwed up. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I did not mess up. But that's okay. I undid, and so you can see what I was looking at. So what I was looking at is to make sure that that rotation was the right way. I was for some reason in my mind, I was hoping it was going that way. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is fix these other rotations. And to do that, I'm going to use the rotate tool when I'm in that component for the local rotation axis. But when I do that, I want to make sure I rotate them very carefully. So I'm going to open up my options for the tool. I'm going to rotate. And I think by default, I'm not going to do it, but under step snap here, it's usually on absolute. And the reason I don't like to have it in absolute is because of things that can happen like this. So I'm going to bring out a sphere here. Let me show geometry. I'm going to hide my guy. And you see how my rotations are all, you know, they're not absolute numbers. If I hold down J to snap, actually it's snapping on, so J is a toggle. So if you have snap on, it'll turn it off. If it's off, it'll turn it on. But anyway, we're in absolute, and watch what happens when I go to rotate. See how I get that little tiny bit of movement there? What it's trying to do is find that rotation to be absolute before it does its snapping. Now I don't want that, so I'm going to set it to relative. And now what happens when I rotate it, you see it does one snap. And it's basically using that original rotation to then add to the 15 degrees to that. And that's generally what you want. Incidentally, I'm not in gimbal, but if I was in gimbal, you can see I'll get a clear only single rotation there. So let me delete that. And actually, I'll set this back to off. And incidentally, once you set it to whatever you set it, then you set it off, it stays at whatever that last one is. So it's in relative when I hit J. And to test that, I'm going to hold J, and you can see it goes to relative. All right. So what I'm going to do is go back to my component mode, make sure I have that question mark selected, and select my three axes, axes, my local rotation axes here. And I'm going to hold down J and snap these guys around so that they're now facing the same way as all the others. And the reason I be careful with that snapping, and I make sure I only do it in the x-axis, is that I want these orientations of the x-axis to stay aligned with the joint. If they're not aligned, I can get some wonkiness with rotations, and I can also get some wonkiness with the IK handles. The next thing I want to do is to make sure that my transform axis follows my rotate axis. This isn't imperative, but it is very helpful in a lot of different scenarios. And I always just like to make sure that that's a clean thing. Now, as far as I know, there isn't a way in Maya vanilla to do, well, I shouldn't say vanilla because everything in Maya is vanilla. But there isn't a tool in Maya specifically that you can push a button and just give that to you. And this is a little bit of a letdown, but it's very, very easy to overcome. And actually, it's a nice intro to Mel, if you want, or even Python, because you can do it with Python as well. But the command I'm going to use is called joint-e-zso. And all that really does is it's just going to take this local translate and match it to my local rotation. So watch what happens when I run this. Bing. So I'm in object mode for both translate and rotate. And it's just going to go in there and pop that right around for me. And incidentally, if you have multiple objects selected, it'll do all of them. I'm just doing one at a time so you can see it. Okay, so now that I've got my joints oriented the way they should be and looking the way they should be, actually I want to fix this last one. And for that one, what I actually use is joint-e-z-none, I think it is. I actually have it in my thing here just to make it easy on myself. I have it just because, yeah, joint-e-oj none. So I'll show you that one too. Joint-e-oj none. And what that's going to do is just set it to its parent's rotation so it matches, right? So now I have the two matching. I believe it also does the translate at the exact same time, so you don't have to worry about that. Okay. And the reason I do that is just so if I'm going to take a control and snap it to here, it's going to align with the rest of the joint chain. If I left it the way it was, it'd be kind of a weird thing, just like our snake tail. It's going to rotate funny. So now I've got all my axes rotated the right way. Probably the hardest part of doing foot rig or rigging of any kind. I want to go in here and just name these guys. So there's a couple different ways I can name it. One of my favorites tools is this thing called Comet Rename. It's been around since like the birth of Maya, basically. It's written by Michael Comet, who used to work for VeggieTales, and then I worked with him at Blue Sky. And it's still my favorite renamer. It works great. I use it all the time. Normally what I do is I'll just do a select HI, and then do like L, what is it, a leg, and that, and it's going to give me a nice naming scenario there. And then also I'm going to put a suffix on it, underscore joint. Again, this is just my preference. You can name it anything you want. Since I'm going to have two legs, a left and a right, that's why I put the L on there to know that it's on the left side. And again, it's just for naming. It's mostly for human readable. It's also to make sure that none of my names are clashing. And so again, he's sort of in an A pose, which you're going to get 90% of the time. I am going to build the leg straight, but I'm going to move it afterwards with the rig, and I'll show you how to do that. So, but I am going to align it basically where I want to align it with the hip. The reason I don't want it to align with the A pose is because if I bring this over like that, you notice now that my ankle is kind of wonky. Even though it's in the right position, it's not gonna, if I rotate it, it's a little bit funny. Then I gotta rotate it back to get it, I gotta rotate it over this way, then I rotate it over this way to make it align. So it's much easier to just rig it straight, make sure everything's gonna rotate correctly, and then put it into position. So I'm gonna leave it like this, right like that, and I'll be happy with that. While I have this built, and before I do any rigging, I'm actually gonna mirror my joints. I know that you, once you have the rig done, can go into Edit, Duplicate, Special, and by using, Duplicate Input Graph, create a whole new module of what you created. Honestly, I think you should just learn how to rig. You can do that. It'll work 90% of the time. The problem is when it doesn't work, then you got to go hunt things down and figure out why it's not working. And especially when you're learning, I think it's better just to learn how to rig it. And this is repetitive. I always tell people that Maya is like a video game. Like I treat it, I interact with it like it's a video game. There's hotkeys and marking menus all over the place. If you can just get fast at doing that, a lot of this other stuff will go by the wayside. You don't need these tricks quite as much. Okay, so mirroring. I'm going to go in here into skeleton, mirror joints. Again, I don't do this by hand a lot. The one main thing I can do is from left to right. Now, if it's an arm, I'm almost 90% of the time going to do behavior. With a leg, 90% I'll do orient. It really doesn't matter in this particular case because we're doing a very simple rig. But just be familiar that, orientation is going to give you the same rotates for both of them. If I do behavior, which actually tends to be more often, sorry, not orient, but what people want. I'm going to go down here. I don't do it this way. Okay, yeah. Under behavior, it's going to have an opposite behavior. So you see how my rotations are slightly different, toes out, toes in, and rotations are kind of the same but kind of different, right? They're mirrored from each other. Often I'll do that with the rig and not with the joints, so just leave it like that. In this case, I'm just going to work with the one leg, show you how to do that, duplicate that over to the other side, and when I see it duplicate it, I mean just redo it on the other side. So I'm going to hide my little human body here mesh, and I'm going to look at my leg. And I'm going to keep this very simple. First thing I want to do is add my IK handles. Now, if you're not familiar with IK handles, there's a whole plethora of stuff out there. But the main thing that you want to know about IK handles is that they are a solver. So you'll notice you have what's called a single chain solver and a rotate plane solver. So basically, the reason I say that's important is because it's trying to solve the rotations of joints to get to a desired result. So in this case, I'm going to put one at the hip and one at the ankle. And you could also name these joints like hip, knee, ankle, blah, blah, blah. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so what I say by a solver is I'm going to move this thing in world space, and it's going to calculate the rotations of these joints to try and make sure that that ends up being in the right place or solves for that location. You also have, since it's a rotate plate solver, this is what's called your pole vector, and you see how it values on here. So the pole vector is going to tell it which way to angle that knee in this case, right? Now it is moving the entire leg at this point because the rest of it hasn't been constrained or anything like that. But I'm just going to show you, I'll bring the leg up, hit T, and I can actually rotate where that knee is going to aim. Now you've probably heard of the pull vector constraint. Basically what that is just a way to force an object to, or force the pull vector to look at a particular object. So while I'm here, I'll do that really quick. I'm just going to take, and for all my controls, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to do create nerves, sorry, where's my curve? Yeah, sir. Nerves primitives curve. I'm going to delete its history, and it's already frozen, so I don't have to worry about that. And I'm going to group it to itself. And in this particular case, I'm going to say L, knee, PVC, and I'll say L, knee, group. Again, this is my naming structure. You can name it anything you want. And I'm going to snap it to the knee joint by using modify match transformations. I'm actually going to rip this off so I have it for later because I'm going to use it a lot. And now I'm just going to go into world space mode here and move this forward. Now things are kind of hard to see right now, so what I'm going to do is just go quickly in here and color my joints so you can see them. All right, you can see them a little bit better. All right, so here's that pull vector curve that I created. Right now it doesn't do anything. It's just a NURBS curve with a group above it. But I'm going to select that knee PVC curve, select my OK handle, and under constrain, go to pull vector constraint. Not a whole lot of options here you really want to mess with. But now instead I have an object that I can quickly grab and move to angle that object, or that pull vector, right? Cool. So now let's do the foot rig. So you've seen things out there like reverse foot rig, stuff like that. All of it's just hierarchy based. It's really just parenting. Joints can just be parented to other joints and reparented just like every other object. So I like to not use any joints and just use groups. So I'm going to do the same thing as I did before for the pull vector control. I'm going to do create a circle, group it to itself, and I'm going to do this a whole bunch of times, but I'll go through it, I'll snap it into place, and then I will go in and name everything. So the first one's going to be our main ankle control. I'll put that there. And just so you get an idea of how this works, right now I have values on there. I can even take this and rotate it 90 degrees. That's fine. And then I'm going to freeze its transformations, modify freeze transformations. And what I want to show you is that if, whoops, wrong thing, there we go, local rotation axis, is that my local rotation axis, or the rotation axis of my NURBS circle here that I have, matches that of my joint. It's really important. I try to make sure that all my controls match to whatever I'm driving. So you have a whole bunch, like if you're doing FK, IK, and all this sort of stuff, all those controls I want them to match to the same exact rotation axes as each other, and that's what's happening here. So let me zero that back out, and I'm going to name this one L foot control. Cool. And I'm going to name its group L, oops, L, come on now, foot group. Cool. Great. And that's the first control. Now I'm going to create another one just by duplicating this and snapping it to the ball of the foot here. And we change it to L ball and L ball. And again, this is where really simple scripts like the comment rename comes into place. But I'm going to do it with vanilla Maya so that you can see that it can be done. It's not that crazy. I'm duplicating the ball control again, and I'm going to snap it to the toe here. And I'll do the same thing. Change ball to toe. Toe. And comment rename has a great thing for that for search replace that I could have used, but again, vanilla Maya. All right. And then I'm going to take this last toe control and I'm going to duplicate that and just slide it back here. And I'm going to show my geometry for a second. And basically what I'm looking at is where that rotation is going to happen for the back of the heel. So we probably don't want it where I have right now, but I'm going to bring it forward and actually bring it down right about there. So that way when the heel is rotating, it's rotating right about here. And the same thing with the toe control. Right now it's up in the air. I'm probably not going to want to rotate that because it's these controls are to rotate that foot when it's touching the ground. So again, you want to move the groups and bring it down here and just put it right about there. Let me check this one. Yep. In fact, if I really want to be specific about it, I can just go in here and press 0, make sure that they're at 0. Now this center one, I do want to keep it right on the joint because we're going to interact with that joint directly. Okay, let's hide that geometry again. Cool. So I have a bunch of different groups here, and I'm just going to end up grouping those up together. But first I need some more IK handles. So right now I only have one here. I'm going to take that one and parent it underneath this control here. And that's going to be, just a way to quickly access my IK handle. And now if I want to rotate that from this position, all I got to do is take this group and parent it under my ball control. Now it's not going to look right now, work right now the way I want it in the end because I haven't added those other IK handles. So I'm going to go in here and go to skeleton, create IK handle. This time I'm going to switch it to a single chain solver because I don't need a pole vector for these guys. And I'm going to go from my ankle to the ball of my foot. I'm going to hit Y and then go from the ball of my foot to the toe of my foot. So now I've created 2 more. I could rename these if they really cared, but I don't really care. So I'm going to take this IK handle, parent it underneath the ball control. And I'm going to take this IK handle and parent it underneath the toe control. So watch what happens now when I rotate this control that's going to control this IK handle up here. It's going to rotate up from that bottom of that foot. This is like when you first start to take a step, your toes stay on the ground just a little bit, it's going to lift there. The next thing I'm going to do is take a look at rotation of my toe control here, and you see it's doing nothing because I haven't grouped anything yet. So I'm going to take the top group of this ball control and parent it under my toe control. So check this out. Now it's just going to lift that foot, right? And this is still going to do some weirdness. I don't really care about that right now, but I am going to be able to lift it here. The next thing I want to do is rotate from the heel. So, yep, you guessed it. I'm just going to parent it under the heel control. And for some reason, it's still called toe. So let's change that name. Heel. Heel. Cool. So now I can rotate it from the heel. I can rotate it from the toe. And I can rotate it from the ball of the foot. But I can't rotate currently from the ankle, and that's just because of our parenting and of which controls we have. So what I'm going to do is actually create one more control. This time, let's go here and blah, 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 make a circle. Let's look closely at it and grab its vertices, CVs, and make it into like a square. Again, delete its history. Cool. Group it to self. And let's zoom out. And this one I'm going to call L foot group. L foot CTL. And actually, I think I called that this. Let me just change this to L foot IK and L foot IK. Okay, cool. So I have this control here, which is going to be my main control to move the entire foot. I'm going to snap it to this joint. There we go. I want to see it, so I'm going to make it bigger. And I want to have it angled the right way, so I'm going to rotate it. Cool. And again, I want to freeze those rotations. So modify, freeze rotations. Cool. And so right now, I can move the whole foot by moving that heel, but I can't rotate from the ankle, right? So this pivot is in the right place for that. I'm just going to take that heel control, parent it underneath the foot control, and now I have a foot control that'll move my entire foot around, which is what you're going to do most of the time. Like when you're in the air and when you're doing your blocking and all that sort of stuff, that's kind of what you're going to do. Then when you want to really work on that foot planting, you're going to work on the heel to come down, and then the ball of the foot to come up, and then the toe of the foot to come up. So you can, use such different keys and all sorts of stuff to drive this, or you can just, rotate them by hand. And then you have this control to move the whole thing. And this one is kind of just a saver for that IK handle. It really doesn't do anything, but I like to have it there just so I have quick access to my IK handle. You may or may not hide that from your animators. Fucking kidding me. Okay, and speaking of animation, I also want to clean up my channels a little bit right now. So right now I'm showing scale and rotate, scale and visibility on all these guys. Oh, look at that. I have history on somebody. This control, let me find it in here, has some history on it. I want to make sure I get rid of that. So modify, edit, delete by type, history, that gets gone, good. So for all these controls, I want to make sure I get rid of the scale and visibility because nobody wants to see that. So I can just right click on here and say lock and hide selected, or if you have my channel tools, it's just this button here. So now I have a really basic control rig. And what I want to do is show you like what that hierarchy looks like. So if you look over here, you can see it's a very simple hierarchy of objects. So you can kind of play with that and get what you want it to do. So what I'm going to show you is a way to add some more pivots in there. So one of the things I've said so a lot. So what I'm going to do is add a left and right pivot for rolling the foot. So I'm going to go up here again, and I do this so often, I script all this. So I'm going to create a circle, I'm going to group it to itself, I'm going to delete, edit, delete by type, history, I probably have to select the object. Yep, bing, good. All right, and I'm going to take that and just sort of put it right where I think that pivot should be. Okay, I'm going to group, duplicate it, and move it over here. So I'm going to have L pivot in CTL and L pivot out CTL, and then rename them, pivot out group, L pivot in group. Okay, cool. And just by changing my parenting, I can add the functionality of rolling that foot to the outside or rolling that foot to the inside. So if we take a look here, we're probably going to want, the heel to be able to rock. So what I'm going to do is I'll go up to the top, the upper group of the heel group. That's what I have here. And I'm going to parent it underneath this outer pivot. So watch what happens. Now I can kind of pivot that foot to the outside. And then if I want to pivot to the inside, I'm going to take this top group and and parent it to the inner pivot. So now I can go to the inner pivot. Now, what you'll notice is when you move things get left behind. That's generally okay. When you're animating, you will be moving back and forth between those different groups and controls. That's perfectly fine. Again, I want to go in here and hide these scales and rotates because I don't want those. Sometimes I will hide the the transforms, translates, but sometimes that's nice to have too. I trust my animators. Okay, but you'll notice I've lost control over my main control, and all I gotta do is just go to the top group of my pivot, put it here, and now I've got it back again. So now I again have that whole foot control movement. Everything goes around. I can pivot from the toe, I can pivot from the heel, I can pivot from the ball of the foot, and I can roll the foot to the side on either direction, right? And that's just by simple parenting. I'm going to open this up. You can look at the hierarchy. It's a very simple, straight hierarchy. Cool. The last thing I'll probably do before I go into adding extra stuff. Okay, I want to make sure I turn off that question mark. I'm going to grab these guys. I'm going to hold down J and snap these guys so they're flat to the ground. I want to make sure that I have a way that I can sort of just move that toe. So if you're like what's called toe flop, a lot of times, right, when that foot's about to hit the ground, you might rotate this toe upwards. Right now, I don't have the ability to do that, so I want to add that in. So I'm going to do it by scratch again. I'm going to go and create another circle. Edit, delete its history, group it to itself. And I'm going to call this one L, toe, CTL is that what I called this? Ball, toe. I'll call this one instead. I'm going to rename this one to toe to roll. Okay, good. Now I'm going to call this L toe group. I'm also again going to snap it to that same pivot. I'm going to make it bigger. And actually I'm going to, there we go. Put it that way. And basically I want this IK handle to follow what this is doing, but then in the end I still want it parented under here. So it's just a matter of parenting. So I take that IK handle, parent it under the toe flop, which now does what I want it to do, but of course that breaks everything else. If I try and move it, that toe's going to try and stay behind because this control isn't following. You take that and just put it underneath the toe pivot again. So now it's back to where it was. So now I should be able to, yep, roll that and pick up the entire foot, and then pick up the entire foot, and then pick up the entire foot. And it's just a matter of parenting, and that's all it is. And then I just want to make sure things look kind of the way they should look. So again, get rid of the scale and visibility. This one is the roll one. So what I do is I'll grab those CVs, flatten this up, and next I want to update the toe and the heel. One thing you'll notice is when you select something with a giant hierarchy like this is that if you go to component mode, you're going to get every single shape node in there. So what I tend to do is I'll select the curve that I want and arrow down once. That's going to give me just the shape of the curve. So now I can go in here and just quickly access just those CVs for that curve and not the entire hierarchy, which is nice. Okay, so let's see what we got here. All right, that all seems to be working. Let's see how our pull vector looks. I got scales and visibilities. I'm going to hide those, lock and hide those. Cool. Knee group, leg group. Okay, great. So now what I'm going to do is just quickly apply that to the geometry and see how it's all working. So what I'm going to do is go to my front view, and again, when I move this foot over to match, I don't want to use the control itself. I want to use the group above. So I'm going to take that, move it over so it lines up with that foot, and then I'm going to look at it from a top view here and rotate it over so it lines up with the foot. But the nice thing is now I still have I still have zeroed out translations for my controls here because I moved the group above. And because I built it straight, I know it's going to be straight for me. And the last thing I want to do is make sure that my pull vector is aligned correctly. A lot of different ways to do this. I do have a whole video on pull vectors. But in this case, I'm just going to cheat it to be in front of the leg so I know it's bending the right way. Now what I'm going to do is just do a really simple bind on this to see what it looks like. And for that, I'm actually going to use just this leg because I don't have the rest of the body built. And I'm going to select only the joints I want. And you'll notice if you do a marquee select, you're going to get the IK handles that you created. So what I'm going to do is just select those and hide them because you don't need to see them anymore. And now I'm going to go here and select these joints. And I'm always very specific about selecting the joints that I want to use. I don't like to select the top of the hierarchy and just go select everything. And I also don't let Maya sort of choose for me. So in my bind skin options, I always use selected joints. So it only uses the joints I selected. Along that line, I also turn off remove unused influence. Because sometimes you can have two joints that are really close together and it says, you know what, I'm putting all the weight on this joint, drop that other one out. But you may want it. So I always turn that off. I'm going to use heat map because it's a nice default beginning to my weighting. Interactive is good, neighbors is good. Allow multiple bind poses. I just leave that on in case I want to do a second joint chain bind on here for any reason. I do turn off maintain max influences. The main reason for that is that this can trip people up when they go to paint weights. If you're not working in games where it's really specific that you can only use certain amount of joints per influence and all that sort of stuff, don't bother. Turn it off because what Maya will try and do is we'll try and normalize that weight over multiple joints. If I have it set to 3, it's going to want to use 3 joints. And you might be like, no, I only want to use this one. But you go to paint it and your weight goes scattering. A lot of times this is the culprit for that. And colorized skeleton, that's fine. This heat map fall off is the default fall off. I'll let them find Maya. That sounds good to me. I hit apply. It's going to take a second. It's a little bit longer than just closest joint, but I think it works pretty well. All right, so let's just see how that works. Whoops, let's move the NZ. Yep, okay. That seems to look all right to me. If I rotate it, it's going to rotate just that angle. If I grab our pull vector here, it's going to change. Whoops, bring it forward and then up. All right, if I rotate it, it's going to just rotate just the knee for me, which is exactly what we want. Put that back to 0. If I rock back on the heel, that looks about right. If I rock forward on the ball of the foot, it's going to lift my foot up and keep those toes planted. If I go to the toe, it's going to lift it up off the toe. Looks about right. Zero that out. I'm going to go and just see how my pivots look for the side roll. So if I look at this from here, I can see the side roll's a little bit off, but that's okay. I can just move the pivots. So I'm just gonna hit insert, slide that pivot closer, and now when it rotates, and this is just a visual representation for that selection using the NURBS curve. It's the pivot that's more important about where that placement is. So same thing on the outside. I'm a little too close to the inside. I'm gonna move it out a little bit. In fact, what I'll do is I'll arrow down and grab these CVs and move them out so that they're easy to select, and now I can rule on that foot the way I want it to. I can even check that heel, and if it looks funny to you, fix it. So I can take a look at this and see where that pivot is. It's actually not a bad spot. It's just the model's up in the air. It's a little bit strange. So I'm going to leave that. So yeah, so that's pretty basic foot rig. Not a reverse foot, but basically identical to reverse foot, just not using joints. And yeah, I hope that helps. The last thing I'd probably do is just add some automatic channels for rolling and for pivoting. So I'll show you how to do that real quick. So the first thing I'm going to do is to just add a divider channel. This is just a total hack cheat. But if you go to modify, add attributes, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to make the name a whole bunch of underscores. And I'm going to make it an enum. And the reason I make it an enum is because then I can go in here and make it sort of like a dumb channel that doesn't do anything. Right? So I add that in. Now I've got this channel. Whoops. Yeah, I did it. Okay. I shouldn't have given a 0. Maybe that's new to 2024. But this channel doesn't mean anything. All right. So now I'm going to create some channels for rolling and for pivoting. So I'm going to say roll. And I'm going to do it as a float. I'm going to do -10, 10, and the default will be 0. Oops. Bring that back, modify, add attributes. And I'll also do why am I drawing a blank on what you call that? Pivot. It's not pivot. That's fine. We'll do -10, 10 again, and add that in, close it. All right, just by using set-driven keys, I'm going to set this up. So if I go to Windows, animation, no, where the hell, I don't know where it is, because I always make it a quick automatic for me. Oh, it's under key. So under key, you have set-driven key. I'm going to open up the option box window, or the set-driven key window. I'm going to load my main foot control in there. I'm going to select the roll. And what I want to do is work on these guys, right? These are the ones that I want to have do something. Now there's kind of a neat thing that we can do since we have those groups above. I can actually just load in those groups. So rather than interacting directly on the controls, I can use the groups above. So now I can grab heel, ball, and toe. It's going to be the rotate Z. So I'll select that. I'm going to key it so that when left foot control rolls at 0, our foot is flat. I'm going to go negative. And when I'm in negative, I want that foot to roll back, something like that. Let me do that again. Oh, I grabbed the wrong rotation. Is that true of all of them? Z. Z. I guess my foot was somehow the wrong rotation. No big deal. Grab that heel, rotate Z. Actually, let's go rotate Y. Key it at 0. And this is imprecise, but it's fine. Honestly, it's totally fine. I'm going to grab that heel, roll it back like that, key it. So now I basically have my, what the hell did I just do? All right. What are you doing there, buddy? It's definitely, yeah. Oh. Interesting. I have gimbal lock. Well, good. You get to see my mistakes and learn from them and fix them. So, okay, so let's go up there and delete these guys. Break connections. Actually, I want to make sure that I delete the connections and not just break them. Watch what happens if I do a break. Although this may be fixed. Yeah, it's fixed now. Let's delete it. Never mind. Okay, so right now, if I go to my gimbal rotation, you can see that my rotations are not going to give me that value. If I try and use the rotate helper, it's gonna pop my zeros, my negative, my rotated X when I see how they get negative values and kind of, that's called gimbal flip. So I don't want that. So one thing I can actually do is just group this to itself again. And that just adds another group in between the control and the actual group that we created. So I can go in here and just say L heel, L heel SDK. And what's cool about that is that now that can actually act as my rotation. And you can see it's actually in the right direction as the other two. So let's grab these three controls, arrow up once, load them in. And now it should be rotate Z for all of them, right? So it's double check that my L foot control is at 0. Yep, key it. Now, all right, now we're gonna go to -10. Now we're gonna go up to this new heel control, rotate it back. You see it in Z, which is nice. Key it. And watch what happens when I just go from -10 to 0, right? Bum, 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 bum. Nice. Now I'm gonna go to like 5. And for 5, what I'm going to do is just roll up on like my toe like that. Let's do something nice like -35. Key it. I am keying all 3. You don't need to, but it's just nice to just to be sure of it. Okay, now I'm going to go to 10. Actually, I'll just show you how that works. Here, yep, right heel, ball of the foot, and then for 10, we're going to go up on the toe. So for this, I'm actually going to zero out the rotations I have on my foot, the ball of my foot, and I'm going to lift up on my toe like this. There we go. And let's make it, often I'll go in here and just make it a solid number or an even number just to make my life a little bit easier. Okay, so watch what happens. See how that foot flexes now as this one returns to 0 and the pivot, right? Cool. All right. And I just realized, all right, so for pivoting on the sides, I'm going to do the same thing. So let's double check that our rotations are right, and also where the pivots are correct. In this case, they are not. So those pivots have been moved, and this one's wrong. So I'm going to take this, group it to itself, take this, group it to itself. I now have new groups there. These are going to be my SD carry groups. So L, pivot, in SDK, L pivot out SDK. All right, cool. And let's just double check where their pivots are. So you see how it's not correct? I want to make sure that those are in the right places. So a really simple way to do that is to actually show the local rotations of your object you want to snap to. If I go up 1, I'm going to hide my geometry so it's easier to see. So go up 1, I'm going to get the SDK group. I'm going to hit insert, hold down V, and now I can snap to that pivot. Do the same thing over here. Go up 1, see the pivot's off. Now the pivot's on. Right? So now my pivots line up where they should line up. I can go ahead in here and turn off the local rotation axis on these controls. So I'll go in here, go up 1, load drivet. I'm going to use pivot this time, select them both. The rotation is going to be the rotate Z rotation in this case. Key it. All right, so for the foot control, it's, you could go either way. It just whatever makes sense. So we'll say -10 is going to be rolling towards the inside. So I'm going to grab the in. I got them named backwards. Oh, that's really funny. That's okay. I can do it and then fix the name after the fact. So I'll roll up like this, break the ankle. Again, I'm going to make it an even number. 40 is nice. I'm going to select them both. Make sure I key them both. All right, back to 0, and then over to 10. So back when it's over on 10, what was it? 40? Sure. There we go. Make sure I select them both. Key them. Cool. Go back to 0, and now I should be able to pivot my full foot back and forth like that. Cool. And let me fix those names because apparently I got them completely backwards. Cool. Sorry for going off the rails there. All right. So now when you're doing that foot roll or that step, you can either use the separate controls or you can use your roll. And again, you can either use the pivots, or you can stay on the main and just use the pivots from here, or rock. It's usually like rock and roll, something like that. Cool. All right, so I know we went off the rails a little bit at the end there, but I think this could be helpful to some people. And if you have questions, let me know. And thanks.